I came back from the hospital with my son in my arms and the smell of disinfectant still clinging to my wrapper, and I found my husband sleeping with his mouth open like a man who had wrestled night itself. The afternoon sun was leaning through our thin curtains. You could see the dust in the light, floating like lazy spirits. I placed Ucha on the bed, and he sank into sleep, his chest lifting in small prayers. I stood there for a while, listening for the change in his breathing that always made my heart calm. Then I tied my wrapper tighter and went to the kitchen. I boiled water. I washed the pot twice, then a third time. As if clean metal could chase away the memory of fear, I stirred the soup with a wooden spoon, rounded by years. I added pepper, because pepper wakes the mind. I swept the floor, even though it was not dirty. Sometimes, when you have cried all you can cry, you must move your hands so your heart does not break from stillness. When the food was ready, and I finally carried my plate to sit, I heard him. "Ago, get me something to eat. I'm hungry," just like that. No, how is the boy? No, did the nurse discharge him with any warning? I looked at him and felt heat rise up my neck. My tongue wanted to run like a goat on market day. Wanted to tell him how I had begged the pharmacist to trust me, how the pastor's wife had pressed money into my palm, with eyes that said, "Daughter." Wanted to tell him that I had stood in the corridor, rocking a hot child, whose breath was ragged and thin, singing old lullabies I didn't even know I remembered. But I swallowed it because you cannot fight the wind. I went back to the kitchen and served him. When I set the plate in front of him, I lost the battle I had decided to win. "Are you not going to ask about your son?" I said. The words tumbled out like stones. "You didn't pick your phone. We didn't even have money for the bill. Are you not going to ask how he is? How we came back?" He did not look up. He chewed and swallowed and said, "Are you people not back? Am I not seeing him sleeping there?" He flicked his eyes towards the bed, where the child lay like a small sunrise. Something inside me bent, not broke, just bent the way palm ribs bend when you weave a basket. I cleared the plates when he finished. I washed them slowly, rinsed twice. Then, sitting with my hands in my lap, I told him the pastor's wife had asked that we visit. He stood without a word and drifted into the other room, as if my voice were wind and he were a canoe going where the river pleased. The next morning I met him at the door. "You're going already. You didn't leave money for food." He put his hand on the handle and looked at me with that smile that is not a smile. "Did you not run to the pastor's wife?" he said. "After hearing your tragic story, I'm sure she gave you money that will last you 1 year." Then he left. The door shut softly, as if even wood did not want trouble. That was the moment I decided to call the pastor myself. I asked him to invite my husband, to ask him to come as a father asks a son. And when the pastor called, only then did my husband agree. So we went, our sandals knocking dust off the road, our son on my back, the air smelling of diesel and tomatoes from the stall where women called, "Fine girl, bye." We entered their house and were welcomed with water and the kind of smile that invites you to take off your burdens, the way you untie a headscarf at night. We sat. The ceiling fan beat a slow rhythm like a calm heart. "Brother Ugona," the pastor said, "marriage is blessing with challenges. Better to fight what is outside together than to bleed each other inside. If there is trouble, let us know. The God who began this will complete it. There is no problem," my husband said. His face was a wooden mask carved by a lazy sculptor. The pastor's wife looked at me, and her eyes told me she saw the blistered parts. "Sister Ago," she said softly, "speak." My tongue trembled. A woman learns to fold her complaints and tuck them under her tongue like bitter cola, chew only when alone. But something broke free. "I don't think it was God who spoke," I said, and tears came before permission. "He starved me when I was pregnant. He spends outside and leaves stones for us to chew at home. He is a stranger to his child. The words poured and poured, and I could not stop them. When the pot boils over, it is not the fire's fault alone. Sometimes the cook was looking away. The pastor sent his wife with me to another room, and she held my hand. "You will need wisdom," she said. "Start a small business. We will help, and pray. Pray like a woman who knows that fire can cook soup and also burn a house." I nodded, grateful for the softness of her voice. I walked outside for air and met gossip in a wrapper. Eugene, my brother, had married, and Isu, the man whose gentle eyes once rested on me like a blessing, had married too and left the country. I felt a small grave open in my chest. All the things I had refused in the name of a vision that now felt like rain on a market day. Promises that wet your clothes and leave you cold. Divorce came to my mind like a loud knock. I slapped it away. "God forbid," I whispered. "I will fight." I went back inside. We returned home. For a season, the river softened. My husband brought foodstuffs unasked. The pastor's wife sent seed money. I opened a little business. Customers called me Auntie Ago and blessed my change with prayer. In the evenings, my son slept heavy and sweet, and I slept like someone who had been forgiven. Then the old pattern slipped in, like a lizard under the door. He started waking late and lying still till I left for the shop, so I could not ask for housekeeping money. He started returning only after I had cooked from my own pocket. His face wore the expression of a man who resented the air others breathed. I told myself, be calm, be kind, and kindness will melt stone. But some stones sit in the river for centuries and still do not turn to sand. I became pregnant again. Mama Chi scolded me till her voice went hoarse. "If you won't love yourself, at least love the children yet to arrive," she said. "You have invited rain into your room, and you are surprised your mat is wet." I took the rebuke and wore it like a shawl. I could not return the baby to the sky. I promised to be wiser after. One morning I heard his phone vibrating on the table while he bathed. The number kept calling, as if urgency could pass through glass. I picked to say, "Wait," and a woman's voice flowed into my ear like hot oil. "Ugo, why haven't you picked? Better bring the 100,000 today, or don't touch me again." She kept talking, while I learned how silence can make a body heavy. When he came out, I asked, "How long have you been cheating?" He sneered. I stood in the doorway so he could not pass. There are blows that teach you your own name. The first landed on my cheek so hard the room tilted. Then another. Then the floor. When I woke, my son was crying that thin, panicked cry, and my head was full of bees. I checked between my thighs. No blood. I thanked God aloud and tasted salt. He didn't come home that night. He didn't come home the next. The swelling on my face told the market what I would have hidden. Was it him? Mama Chi asked, voice tight with the anger of women who have survived. I opened my mouth, and all my careful secrets ran into the street. "Leave," she said. "Run while you still have legs." I listened, and somewhere in my chest I agreed. But my feet said no. I had married with prayer. I would not flee with shame. I stayed. He started beating me, as if my skin offended him. I kept the baby alive through storms. I called the baby Yuka when he came, a name heavy with hope. Hope is cheap and expensive at the same time. You would think children make a man softer. You would think wrong. He began to stay away for days. He ate alone like a thief eats. He grew like a weed in a neglected compound. One night, I served watery soup to my boys, and they received it the way poor children receive anything. Small, grateful, quick. Their father came in with a bag of grilled chicken, opened it, and set it before himself. The smell carried memories of better days I had never lived. The boy's eyes followed his hands the way sunflowers follow sun. When the plate held only one piece, my first son dared. "Daddy, please, can we have?" "What have you been teaching them?" He hurled at me. begging, like you? He told me to remove them from his sight. I took them away and held their small insulted shoulders, my throat tight. In the morning, Ucha asked me, "Is Daddy truly our daddy?" I smiled a lie and told him Daddy's anger was work and would melt when money came. Yuka, my stubborn one, my mirror, said, "When I grow big, I will beat him for you and take you away." I rapped his head with my knuckles, as gently as anger allows. "You will not become the man who hurt your mother," I said. I could feel the old spirit prowling under his skin, looking for windows. I prayed the way a woman washes a wound with hot water, knowing the sting is the beginning of healing. Then one weekend, my husband announced a contract in another state. The kind of job story that has many words and few facts. I packed his bag and ironed the shirts I had once liked on him. He stood at the door and gave me 10,000, as if he were washing sin from his hands. "I will send more," he said. I watched him leave and told myself not to feel the relief that rose like a tide. He called the next day to say he arrived. Then silence. 1 month turned to 2. His number was unreachable, the way a lost path is unreachable after rain. On a morning that smelled of dust and fried akara, a woman I did not know called. "Sister," she said, "I have seen your husband with a woman who carries his child in her belly." I thanked her and sat on the floor and let my bones weep. When my boys came home with dust on their sandals and laughter in their mouths, I gathered them and told the truth. "Your father has gone," I said, and the room changed shape. They were children, but children know when a door has closed in a house. After that, the house belonged to my sons and me, but the devil rarely leaves with his shadow. Yuka became the echo of the man who had left me, greedy with food, quick with anger, the kind of boy who can make a mother's hands shake with fear for the future. No, I told myself, this ends here. I sought out Mama Chi, and she put sense on the table like yam. "Go to your brother," she said. Even the Bible tells the story of a son returning. Sometimes home is not marriage. Sometimes home is the brother who warned you and loved you anyway. I traveled with my boys to the town where my brother had moved. The gate was tall and the paint was fresh. Inside was a room that smelled of new furniture and clean money. In that smell, I felt my own years, a bitter taste. When my brother, Eugene, came out, his face tore open with shock and then stitched itself with pity. I knelt and begged, as if forgiveness were a fruit, and he the tree that owned it. He raised me and held my shoulders and said, "You are my blood." He looked at my boys, the way a farmer looks at seedlings, searching for rot. When his eyes rested on Yukar, his mouth tightened. "This one," he said, "carries his father's thunder." He kept us for days and watched the boys with a quiet that made them behave. On the morning we were to go, he said, "You will not return with them. They will stay here, especially this one." The word struck my chest and rang. My boys had been the dregs of my joy. How can you put your last water down and walk away? But then I saw their future, the way a path looks from the hill. How clean it could be if a man's firm hand swept it. I left them there and went home to a bed too big for one. The first week, grief sat on my chest like a fat cat. I folded their clothes and put them away one by one, like prayers into a bottle. I went to the shop. I slept in the afternoon like a child recovering from fever. I wrote their names in chalk behind the kitchen door. Ucha, Yuka. I traced the letters with my finger till it felt like touching their foreheads. Under my brother's roof, my sons were remade. Uncle Eugene does not shout, he carves. He told me on the phone, when a child throws his plate, it is not only food that spills, it is the future. He caught Yuka in small rebellions and cut them like weeds before they flowered. The boy learned to open his palm. He learned the taste of sorry. He learned to give the first piece of meat to his cousin and watch joy instead of swallowing it himself. Ucha went to medical school and learned to hold life between two careful hands without breaking it. He called me late at night and said, "Mummy, today An old woman told me her pain tasted like smoke. I laughed and cried and told him, "You will be the kind of doctor who listens to taste." Years stacked themselves like bowls. My sons turned into men who stand straight even when nobody is watching. They taught me to take joy in tiny things. A text at midnight, a photograph of sunlight on a tiled floor, the sound of their laughter in another city, carried to me by a careless wind. And the man who left, news came in whispers. A sickness that would not be named, a wife who opened the door and told him to take his bad luck into the street. Villagers who shook their heads and said, "A tree falls the way it grew." Someone said, HIV. Someone said a curse that finally found its own owner. Someone said he was living. Someone said he had already gone. I did not go to verify. If I have learned anything, it is that not every story requires your eyes to be real. I am telling you this, not as a sermon, but as a woman with dark skin and a stubborn heart who has walked the same road twice to make sure it was indeed the wrong one. I am telling you how the room smelled and how my feet hurt and how pepper can be a comfort and a cruelty at once. I am telling you how faith can be a net that catches you and also a rope you hang yourself with, depending on who tied it. I am telling you that prayer is water, and water does not boil yam by standing in a bowl beside the fire. You must put it in the pot and light the match. There were days I stood at the mirror and did not recognize myself. The woman looking back had eyes that had seen too much and mouths that said too little. There were mornings I touched my cheek and still felt the memory of his hand there, like a bad tattoo. There were afternoons I wanted to throw my wedding ring into the gutter and watch it disappear into the dark mouth with the happy rats. There were nights I made a stew with the last tomatoes and thanked God that boys can be full of love, even when the soup is watery. There were market days when a customer pressed my hand and said, "God bless you," and I felt seen in a way my husband never managed. There were Sundays when the pastor preached about forgiveness, and I forgave myself a little more than the week before. When I visit my sons now, I carry gifts wrapped in brown paper and tied with old ribbon, and I do not apologize for the simplicity. We sit on their balconies in the evening, and the city does its drama below. Horns arguing, generators coughing, hawkers offering roasted corn with butter that shines like small miracles. We laugh. We remember. We do not talk about their father unless someone needs a parable. Sometimes they tell me, "Mummy, you should have left sooner." I nod. Then I tell them that leaving is a road, and sometimes the road is hidden by tall grass. You learn to lift your feet high and trust your calves to forgive you later. What is a life if not a stubborn thread tied to other threads, forming something that can hold a weight? My thread twisted with a bad thread for a season, but then my brother's hand, my son's hands, my own two hands. Together we braided something strong. The day I understood I was free, I was standing at the window at dawn. The sky was the color of ripe pawpaw. A woman walked past with a tray of bread on her head and a song in her mouth. I opened the window and let that song into my small house. It smelled of yeast and beginning. I am not the girl who said yes at an altar because someone else's dream wore God's name. I am the woman who cooks with a clean pot and does not apologize for the pepper. I am the mother whose sons grew straight because a good man staked them like tender yam. I am the sister who came home and did not find the door locked. I am the woman who chose not to carry a grave inside her chest anymore. Sometimes, when the night is soft and the fan sings a lazy lullaby, I think of all the women whose stories sit like hot coal in their mouths. I imagine placing a bowl of cool water in their hands. I imagine saying, "My sister, drink," then speak. I imagine churches where discernment is not a word that gathers dust in the corners, where women are believed when their laughter has a crack in it. I imagine boys who learn gentleness, like they learn football, by practice, by falling, by rising again. I imagine girls who understand that a man who spends like a king in the street but starves you at home is not a mystery, but an answer to a question you should stop asking. If you are listening to me now, know this. It is not weakness to run from fire. It is wisdom. And if you must stay to cook, wear a cloth you can afford to burn. I stayed longer than wisdom advised, but I did not drown. I came out of that river with my lungs full of air and my arms full of sons who are becoming men I would marry if I was someone else's daughter. The world does not clap for stories like mine. It prefers miracles that arrive overnight. But I will take my slow miracle, the one that tasted of pepper and tears and small mercies, the one that looked like a market woman pressing money into my palm, the one that sounded like my brother's voice on a morning when I thought I was alone, the one that grew into 2 tall boys who hug me without shame. The day the harmattan finally loosened its grip, I took a bus to the old village with a small calabash of palm oil, 2 loaves of sugar bread, and a wrapper the color of river mud after rain. The road was long and pitted like a tired face, and the conductor's voice kept cutting the morning like a blunt knife. Shift, sister, shift small, until our elbows became familiar. I had not planned to go back, but dreams had been visiting me. My mother's laughter rising from a mortar, my childhood yard, and a shadow sitting where the hibiscus used to bloom. Some doors you must open yourself, even if your hands shake. When I stepped down at the square, the village smelt of wood smoke and sun-warmed cassava. Children ran half-naked with the courage of small kings. Old women with blue-black gums sat under the udala tree, their stories sliding over each other like fish in a basin. Someone recognized my face inside my new life. Ah, Argo. You have come. No accusation, just a soft amazement, as though an old song had found the right mouth again. I went first to the stream to wash travel dust from my ankles. The water was brown and honest, cold against the parts of me that had learned city heat. A girl in a red dress balanced a basin of clothes on her hip and stared with wide, amused eyes. "Auntie, your wrapper fine," she said. I laughed and gave her one of the loaves. Her thank you sounded like a bell rung in a small church. Then I turned toward the compound I once entered as a bride. The gate hung lower than I remembered. Papaw trees leaned in, eavesdropping. His mother was on the veranda with a shawl around her shoulders, even though the sun was awake. Time had been chewing at her gently, but without mercy. Her hands were speckled like a bird's egg, her eyes watery and quick. When she saw me, something flew across her face. Surprise, then pride, then a fear she tried to hide in her shawl. "My daughter," she said, voice brittle and sweet. "You still remember the way?" "I never forgot," I answered, placing the palm oil on the step, bowing with both hands. The old ways can hold you without choking you if you choose them yourself. We did not speak his name. We spoke instead of yams, of rain, of how the new catechist sings like someone who has forgiven the whole world. She asked after the boys, and when I told her one was a doctor, the other a businessman who wakes before dawn, her hands went to her chest. "Ewu," she said softly, as if she had stepped on a miracle barefoot. A neighbor passed with a broom and slowed to listen, the way neighbors do when the wind smells like news. Only then did the old woman lower her voice. "They said they carried him back to the village square some months ago, thin like a broomstick. He was asking for water from mouths he had dried." She looked at me, the way a person looks at a road before stepping onto it. "I did not go out," she finished, eyes steady. I nodded. The air between us filled with the sound of a goat tugging at its rope, the click of a distant pestle, my own breath. "Mama," I said at last, "I came to greet you, to thank you for the son you brought into this world, for the lesson he became in my life." Her mouth trembled. Her eyes shone without falling. We sat like that, 2 women who had survived the same storm from different houses, warming our hands at a small fire of honesty. Before I left, she pressed 2 cola nuts into my palm. "Break bitterness with your teeth," she said. Spit what you cannot swallow. I put them in my bag, beside the wrapper and my bus fare, like a charm against forgetting. Back in the city, my boys met me at the park. Ucha smelled of antiseptic and late-night coffee. His hug was the kind that arranges bones back into their proper places. Yuka's palm was firm, his eyes clear, the stubborn river in him now disciplined into a canal that feeds fields. "Mummy," he said, lifting my bag before I could argue, "come and see the shop. We painted it the color you like, the one you said looks like roasted groundnut." We walked the street together, 3 shadows playing on pavement. Their steps matched mine without trying. We passed a tailor's radio, shouting high life into the afternoon, and a woman fanning suya, till the smoke wore perfume. At the corner, a little boy tripped and spilled his zobo. Before I could reach, Yuka was already kneeling, dabbing the red brightness from the boy's shorts with his own handkerchief. I felt my throat pull tight, like a stitch taken in the right place. The shop door opened to new wood and fresh hopes. Shelves waited like open arms. On the back wall, in neat strokes, someone had painted, "A Go and Sons." I stood very still, letting the letters enter me, letting their sweetness sit on my tongue before I swallowed. "Tell us about the village," Ucha said, leaning on the counter like a boy again. I told them about the stream, the udala tree, the old woman with the bird egg hands, who gave blessings without the word. I did not tell them about the shadow I didn't go to see. Some histories you honor by refusing to rehearse. Evening came on like a gentle drummer. We rolled down the shutter halfway and ate akara from brown paper, oil staining our fingers gold. A small girl pressed her nose to the glass and giggled at her reflection. I waved her in and gave her the last ball. Her mother thanked me with a nod, thick with the language of women who count coins in their heads while smiling at their children. On the walk home, the first stars stitched themselves to the sky. The road was full of people returning to their small kingdoms. Tailors with chalk on their fingers, mechanics holding their day's grease like trophies, market women with empty basins and full hearts. A night bus coughed, a baby laughed. Somewhere, someone was learning to say sorry and mean it. At the door of my flat, my keys made their careful music. I paused there with my sons behind me, and in the quiet between one breath and the next, I felt the world tilt back into place. The harmattan had left. The windows wore a thin dust, only because the day had been busy. Inside, the fan would hum. The kettle would listen. My bed would forgive me for the years I did not sleep. I turned the key and thought, not of him, not of endings, but of tomorrow's stew, how the onions would surrender to heat, how tomatoes would blush into themselves, how pepper would bite and then bless. I thought of the morning I would wake to a room that smelled of soap and plans, of a door I could open without fear, of the quiet power of choosing where my feet go and who they walk beside. And I stepped in,